three core things that I kind of look at when it comes to evaluating markets, right? And finally, on the customer side of things, right? This really, you've heard a lot about it. Everyone, I think this is where everyone starts off by saying, customers, you need to be customer obsessed, you need to be customer focused, you need to be customer centric. I don't know what other product marketing terms are there, but really, for me to understand the customer, right? Whatever you call it, centricity, focus, obsession, madness. There are any kind of synonyms you can find to highlight and say customers at the center of your world. Um, I really look at it from the customer segment perspective. What does that mean is primarily how large your segment is. Where does your product really fall when it comes to a certain to the segment that you're operating to? And you would find product services ranging from niche segments to large segments. Honestly, it's a scale of understanding where you stand. It's not really um, one would generally look at this customer segment and say, hey, this kind of gives me a value of whether I should go after the market or not. Not really, honestly, because there are certain niche segments with very small sizes which will give you returns which are so high that it makes sense for people to operate only in that niche segment, right? So take that in that perspective in terms of understanding what's the scale that which the segment is that you would operate in, right? Um, if you look at the segment, the next part which I bring in the segment is the customer profile, right? So even within segments, one must understand that segments, while they might be homogeneous in certain characteristics, uh, they are heterogeneous in certain other, right? So you would have cohorts within these segments itself, and that's a very simplistic way of what this famous term called ideal customer profile or ICP kind of refers to. Because while my segment might be large, there might be a particular cohort within that segment, which really works for me. Maybe a size of the company, maybe the number of years it's been operating, maybe the kind of revenue models that drives it, right? And that's really the ICP, because if there is a complete segment that you're offering kind of caters to, the ideal customer profile really tells you which cohorts within it and what's the path for you to expand into that segment. And finally, the persona. The persona is even one level deeper. It's granular in terms of really understanding who's the person that you're selling to, right? So there's a segment, there's the ideal customer profile or cohorts behind underneath that, and then there is the person within that cohort, which really is uh, three things that if you really understand, then customer obsession, centricity, whatever you call that, becomes really very clear. And when you bring all of these three pillars, right, that's where your clarity or your understanding of how and what GTMs to follow or what methods to kind of combine together becomes very, very clear. And that gives me a good segue into move into what are the methods, because I kept talking about the fact that, look, all of this understanding the motions. Now, in my mind, right, there are, and please do pardon me, this is not an exhaustive list. There are a whole lot of hybrid methods in between all of these. There are some new methods in terms of some people would say, hey, I only do that through influencer-driven sales or anything like that. So this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the most popular ones, right? If you look at the first block, which is the low touch and the consultative, right? These are really two opposite side of things, where inbound is where you bring, it's a pull mechanism. You pull people to yourself and to your value proposition, to your product, to your services. And that's how it kind of operates. The reverse of that is really a consultative approach, where you coax them to ask you a question so that you can explain them things, or in certain cases you start explaining things and educating them before they start getting interested in your offering. In my book, I think the understanding of the product that you have in the market, the inherent understanding really is one of the critical factors where you decide whether it's an inbound or an outbound. Because if it's a low touch inbound, then there has to be inherent understanding of the product or the services that you're offering. If that doesn't exist, then you will anyway land up on the consultative side of things, because you would first have to create the need and therefore address it post that. If I look at the top two, right, on the right hand side, the product led and the sales led, this has become very, very famous since the time the SaaS products came into motion, and product led growth approaches started taking shape. It became a lot easier. I started my career in at a point in time in technology when perpetual licenses were a thing. Servers were a thing which were installed within customers to run these massive enterprise softwares that we used to call it back then. Uh, PLG really came into fore since the time things like SaaS and cloud kind of started taking shape, because what that allowed you to do was to really replicate very quickly across the entire market. Sales led, again, probably as old as the sun. It is what where it's the traditional way of doing things, where there is a sales organization, whether on the ground or on the digital force, but really bringing about and driving the sales motion rather than really your product, you getting people hooked onto their product and then taking them through that journey. And finally, two other very critical ones, right? Again, really is dependent on the shape of the market that you operate in terms of account-based marketing and partner-driven. Account-based marketing, again, very high touch, very deep, insightful, takes a lot of thought and effort to kind of run, bringing all of these channels together. It's a play of patience as well when you're at the account-based marketing mode. And then there is partner-driven, because partner-driven is where you have the great opportunity to scale exponentially, saving a lot of costs into what your direct sales would look like, but um, at the lieu of certain amount of control that you have in that motion, right? So if you look at it, these really are some of the options that you have when you get into a GTM motion. Now, having said that, I wanted to go back to my first three pillars and um, kind of give you something a little more concrete to work with in terms of how you would think about it. So let's start with the first one, right? Yes, product, there is value, there is cost, there is ease. We talked about these three levers. Great. You have an understanding of it. You spend some time thinking about it and said, okay, this is my value, this is my ease, this is my cost, and so on and so forth, that my customers kind of look at it. Now, if you look at it, these really are three perpendicular pillars, right, to each other. And when you think about value, ease, and cost, you generally would land up somewhere within this room. Think of it as a room with two walls and a floor, right? And somewhere in that room is where you stand in terms of the value that you bring, the cost that you charge, the ease that you promise to your customers. And how does it really work? Like, if you look at it this way, right? Here's a product which kind of is um, has a lot of ease in terms of the way it can be implemented, the way it can be administered, as well as the way it operates, right? With a very low cost. But the value at the end of the day from something like this is not very high. And um, I do not want to demean any product by saying, hey, the value they bring is not very high. But think of something like a DocuSign, right? There is a very, of course, the DocuSign folks would say there is a whole set of use cases, but at the end of the day, it's just a online signing tool, right? So does that bring a lot of value? Does it bring strategic value? Possibly not, but it's easy to use. It's not very expensive. And that's where, when you land up somewhere here, is where you would, if you look at those six things we talked about in the last slide, this is where a product-led growth approach, because it's easy to implement, it's a low cost. So you can see that right amount of scale. And the low touch model works because it's easy, right? Even if the value is not very high, you can really make a market out of it. Now, let's just move somewhere a little further off from there, right? Almost on the other side of the room that we're talking about. And this is where there's products which bring you great value. A lot of enterprise products do that, but they also cost you a lot of money, right? A Salesforce is one such example. It brings you value. It is a platform. It's all in one. It's all kinds of fancy things that it can do across multiple of your functions, sales, marketing, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's expensive. That is where the SLG model kind of works because products like these are also quite complex. So the ease of use really is something which might not be something that they would like to focus on. But and the kind of audience and the group and the segment and the cohorts that they kind of talk to also really care less about that than the ability for it to solve complex use cases, right? Uh, Now, if you look at these two very different parts of the market and very different approaches, PLG and low touch there, sales-led growth and more consultative here, because these are complex products. Um, what about this particular product, right? High value, quite difficult to use, not really very easy, and possibly low cost. Uh, for me, a product like this, to be very honest, um, there are some fundamental issues with your three pillars that one needs to kind of address. Because it gives you high value. It is not easy to use, but it is low cost. If that is the case, if it gives you high value, why really would you be in that side of the equation, right? You would probably want to move further up on the cost level because you're leaving a lot of value on that table, right? You're leaving a lot of value which you're not really deriving cost for it. So if I look at it, right, practically, my view is that between these, right, between that side of the room to this side of the room, there is a feasibility plane in which all products fall, right? It's really a plane. Sorry for my graphical skills. I wanted to show you a plane, but I couldn't draw one, so I kind of drew a line. And just imagine that you're looking at it from 3D at an angle where there is a plane behind it and there is something stretching in front of it. But most products lie in this particular plane. And it's also a part of product marketing, which is the market to product side of product marketing, where if you are really not on this plane, then you need to really retrospect in terms of what your product strategy is to bring you to this plane, because that's where the ideal operating model when it comes to your GTM, you would be able to find, right? A similar approach, if you look at target markets, which really is the second pillar, there's market sensitivity that we talked about in terms of cost, regulation, so on and so forth. Channel complexity, in terms of what the affinity to that market is, and then really competition. Here again, a couple of examples. You see here a market where competition is high, where channel complexities are high. That's where I think an SLG and a consultative model really works, because you would generally see large average deal sizes there, but it will be a long process. It'll be long sales cycles and extremely complex one, right? And that's where an SLG and a consultative model will really bear you fruit, because both of these are slightly expensive, right? These are not models which can scale very quickly when it comes to cost. If we go to the other end of that room, their channel complexities are less. So approach to channels are easier. They are cheaper, but people are slightly more cost sensitive as a market. But again, competition is low. In that particular case, really, a PLG model works for you because channels are cheap. It's a cost sensitive market, so it will not pay you very high. Therefore, as you keep your CACs low, it works for you. And again, competition is low, so not bad for you in terms of scaling really quickly in that market itself, right? So that's again the feasibility plane which exists between these two mediums. Your product can land up at multiple places, but that's a discussion on product strategy, and hopefully we can do one of those someday. But if you are not on that plane, the closer you get to it, the faster you do that, the better it is, and the easier it is for you to kind of build something build a GTM motion which is scalable, and which kind of operates well, right? And finally, the last of the rooms that we visit today is the customers. Again, three pillars here that we talked about: the segments, the ICPs, the buyer persona, and a couple of examples right here, uh, where a product which has a very large segment that it caters to, but has rather simple ICPs, right? Ideal customer profiles that can be identified easily, and there is more singular buyer personas where it kind of caters to. Um, that's probably where a PLG motion will kind of work with, right? And it'll be a low touch because it's a very large segment. You can get more of them. Generally, products of this scale would not have a very high cost associated with it, because the cost of ownership would have to be low to cater to this kind of a singular buyer persona and use case kind of a model. Again, we talked a little bit about DocuSign. Started off there, of course. It has actually a number of buyer personas because from HR to everybody who needs a signature on anything has become its persona. So really, what would happen there is that this dot for DocuSign would move further up the y-axis, the z-axis, closer towards you, right? But continues to be a PLG and a low touch kind of a motion. Something which has where if you are operating in a niche segment, right, where your segment is small, you have complex ICPs that you're kind of catering to. You have multiple buyer personas involved in any GTM cycle or sales cycle that you have. Uh, that's really the ideal for SLG and consultative sales, right? Again, classic point, somebody like a Salesforce, somebody like a ServiceNow will land up here. The direct opposite side is somebody like a HubSpot. Everyone needs a marketing tool, but not everyone has complex use cases to solve. Neither do they have multiple buyer personas involved. The larger the organization, the more prefixes you add to the word marketing. You start with one marketing function, but then it becomes product marketing, customer marketing, partner marketing, influencer marketing, brand marketing, whatever you can think of, you can add to the word to in front of the word marketing to get there. But really, this is where the feasibility plane kind of lies in this particular room, right? Again, this plane, while I have drawn it like this, it probably starts at one of the corners, extends across it. And if you are not on this plane, or you feel that the closer you get to it, the more scalability you can bring in your model. Now, what really makes it very complicated is that while we looked at these three rooms and these feasibility planes and so on and so forth, and how to think about it in terms of where do you land versus PLG, low touch versus SLG, consultative, and so on and so forth. Uh, these rooms do not exist in isolation, right? All these three really work together. So while another layer of cockpit that you might see over here is when you think of it from a product perspective, you might land up at a PLG inbound kind of a motion, right? Or you might land up at a product-led growth and partner-led motion, right? Or an ABM with a consultative sales motion because your segment is that small that you just have 100 people to attack, right? But when you look at it from a customer perspective or from a market perspective, you might see that it is quite contrary to what your product accesses or feasibility plane or your positioning in the feasibility plane kind of places you at. Therefore, it's really while you do each of these in isolation, in the ideal world, in the ideal product, in the ideal product positioning from a common term that you would find in any product marketing handbook, uh, you would probably land up at the same conclusion across all of these three pillars. But it hardly happens. At least in my book, it's always there is some bits of conflict, some correlation between those three positions that you find in those three rooms where you have to find a middle ground to kind of make it work. Uh, this is where experimentation makes it makes things very critical when it comes to go-to-market motions. As I started my section today by saying that, look, everything I say, take it with a pinch of salt, because while I might turn around and say, hey, it's a feasibility plan, and if you're not there, unfortunately, that's it for you. Many of you might come back to me after 3 years and hey, they say, hey, Shubharan, I attended one of your sessions and you were pretty vehement about this feasibility plan. I landed up way outside the feasibility plan, and look at me, we are going IPO in a couple of days at some billions of dollars of valuation. So really, experimentation continues to be the key whenever you're kind of bringing all these three facets together. You cannot find that mix. You would always land up in a very rarely, or at least in my experience, I have never seen a product where on across all three planes, the answer was the same, right? There's always a doubt, there's always a Bermuda Triangle there. And to find that right spot within it, Bermuda Triangles are always mysterious. So to find the right spot, experimentation really is what gets you there. And you keep doing that in a cost-effective, scalable manner. And that's where, if you're on the feasibility plane, it becomes a lot more feasible. It becomes a lot more cost-effective and scalable for you, right? That's why the whole idea of trying to get that there. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what I had in the first part of this section. I don't know. I'm sorry, my slides don't seem to be moving. I'm guessing I'm at my last slide. Unfortunately, I didn't know that myself. But that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Uh, a rather simplification of a very complex problem, but it's a great fundamental framework which has always helped me in kind of visualizing or kind of trying to decipher this problem, right, through its various facets. Yeah, and hopefully it helps you guys as you're kind of looking at your side of the coin, to kind of decipher your go-to markets with a little more thought, with a little more insight, uh, data driven, as one calls it, as far as your approach is concerned. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. I said 10 minutes. I don't even know if I'm on time or I rambled on for a lot longer. Topic very close to my heart, so it does happen. Back to you, Varun, for the questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think the way you were explaining, oh, other 15, 20 minutes, we can definitely listen to you. So I don't think anyone
Thank you so much.
uh, anyone will say that. But yeah, I think the framework, the way in which you have explained, I can at least say that next time, whenever I'm explaining product marketing and everything, I'm definitely going to use that framework for sure. So thank you so very much. I think without further ado, let's go over the questions. So guys, we
Mhm.
already received so many questions from the registration form. So I would first go through them, and then meanwhile, please add your question in the chat, and we will also open the floor later, so you can ask your question to Subharam directly as well. But Subharam, let me start with the first question. Uh, Specifically to USA GTM. So how to identify GTM impact in US market?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, couple of things, right? Yeah, I saw this question in the pre-questionnaire which came to me. See, any impact to any market, any GTM motion really operates on. I'm guessing some of you would have heard of the Planck's constant, right? It really does not change, whatever be the context, whatever be the framework. So measuring customer acquisition and retention really stays at the core of any GTM impact, whether it's the US, whether it's Europe, whether it's Alaska, whether hopefully at some point in time it's the planet Mars as well. This Planck's constant doesn't change, right? So really looking at it from the perspective of what's really the what's really the acquisition rate that you're kind of looking at? What's your what's the value that you're generating from your customers? And what's your scope to take this value higher? What's the cost of acquisition that you're seeing? And please don't forget that while from a product marketing perspective, it's also very critical to understand churn because it's really the complete equation, right? It's new plus expansion minus churn. And while everyone does a great job on the other things, it's the churn which people kind of tend to miss out on. So whether it's the US or anywhere else, I would always go back to the Planck's constant. This is really the Planck's constant that determines impact to markets. Of course, there are more complex ways of evaluating what your success or impact in any market is or a market entry is. You can look at things like share of voice, market share analysis, customer feedback and surveys. But honestly, in the early days when you're kind of moving in, those basics are what really define you in terms of what's the value that you're being able to generate from that market, what's really the cost that you're paying to get to that value. And finally, how much of that are you retaining on a T plus 30, T plus 90 kind of days to be able to, I would not say T plus 30 and 90, but really, are you beating your CAC versus value
Mm.
in that equation to stay positive is where I would define the impact of any market. US being specific as well. Yeah. US not specifically falling out of any of that universal constant that lies for all market entry.
Understood. One very controversial question: why PMM is treated just like marketing role when that is not the reality?
Well, again, I would start my answer by saying there are lots of misconceptions and myths around the world. It's not possible to dispel all those myths. It's not really possible to provide provide explanation or bring people to see sense. And therefore, some things remain, you let them remain where they are till realization kind of dawns on you. But really, I think it comes from the perspective that people feel that marketing the product is the only thing that companies do when it comes to successful GTM motions. It really is not, right? The product, while it's a critical part of it, there's a whole lot of auxiliary things around it. The services, the kind of customer experience that you provide, and so on and so forth. Now, when all of these come together, right, that's where product marketing is at, right? I always like the three pillars which define it. I always look at it from the perspective of really sitting at the center of four core functions, right? Product on one side, marketing on the other corner, sales on the other corner, and customer success on the fourth corner, right? So you're really at the middle of it. Now, why do people feel that we are marketing? Is because and there is no difference between the two because unfortunately the word marketing is there. If we were called product success sales marketing, then I'm guessing people would have been really confused and would have understood where our space is. But really, that's the reason why people feel that product marketing is really marketing with the word product attached to it. But it's a lot more because product marketing sitting at the center, right, really understands all these four levers, which is why one of the critical skills of a product marketer is to be able to work with multiple stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
And you need to be as much a negotiator as anything else. So if I am to say what is the skill that you need, if we were to be misconstrued as something, I would say a negotiator is something which I would really like to be misconstrued as rather than just marketing. And of course, when I say just marketing, marketing does a lot of great stuff. I currently actually lead all of marketing, so I like each of the disciplines as much. But yeah, traditionally, been a product marketer, been through that. My advice to anybody going through that is hang in there. Sense will finally prevail at some point in time, when reality is right on your face. Yeah.
Understood. One more question. When launching a SaaS product in a new international market or geography, what offline channels should be part of the GTM motion?
Okay. See, it really for me when entering into a new market, right? Offline channels, the primary mix of offline channels, right? And of course, today is a world of cross-channel marketing. It's never a single channel. It's always a combination of channels and journeys which spread across these channels. Because people are no longer buying products by reading a brochure, right? Once upon a time, it might have been true, but today it is not. There's just so much of plethora of information from multiple sources that all of it kind of comes together. So therefore, one is that offline channels are a part of a mix, and it always needs to be, right? My definition of how much of the offline channel do you look at really depends on your appetite. How do I define appetite? I define appetite by one, your ability to spend offline is an expensive channel, right? Uh, Not just in terms of money, but also in terms of effort. Okay. Because both of these are very at the center of any offline channel, right? Certain markets, I would say, have a certain affinity to offline channels. Middle East being a case in point, I've seen that that's where offline channels are very critical because people like to do business sitting across the table. Um, you would find a lot less of that actually in the US markets, right? I also find that very prevalent in many of the mainland European markets where knowing a person sitting across the table is very critical to work that. So on one side, your appetite is really dependent upon how much you bring on the table or you are ready to bring on the table to bring offline into that mix. The second is in terms of the appetite. The second part of the appetite, of course, is what the proclivity to of that market is to the to your to offline channels, right? There are certain markets where things have moved ahead in certain spaces where people do not want to do business in an offline channel, right? For a very long time in the US, um, the reluctance for people to come back to work, it makes it, I wouldn't say offline channels are off the table, but definitely if I were to talk about pre-COVID days, the kind of fanfare that was there is a lot lesser because moving out of the home is still a challenge and people don't want to. I know we've talked about the new normal one day, and probably this is the newer normal, but they don't want to come back from the new normal into the newer normal. So those are the two things I think when one is looking at whether using offline channels or not in the mix that one needs to be very careful. And by the way, there's one more characteristic about an offline channel which I wanted to talk to you kind of in my experience, right? Is that offline channel is as you need to be persistent about it as every other channel, right? So if you're looking at offline channel, do take into account the fact that you will have to continue the momentum. It cannot be a big bang approach where you say, hey, one big event, I'll crack open that market. Sure, if you are an Apple, you could probably do that because of the fan following you'll have. But if you're not, then it has to be a consistent approach where you will start to see offline channels giving you that kind of this thing. So again, that's another one, persistence and your ability to kind of be determined about it and continue at it is, I think, probably the third thing that I would look at when I say it depends on your appetite as to how much of offline channels that you would want to use.
Sorry to cut in. There's two things, Shubharam. One is that I don't know if you know this, but Varun is probably in the top five biggest Apple fans in the universe. So that was well pointed out. The
Brownie
second,
point for me for raising that here. Right example, yeah.
absolutely. The second thing is, and while everything that you've said made complete sense, I think what people are often searching for is
Hmm.
a heuristic, or at least a understanding of what would be a good set of questions to ask to determine whether or not offline is a valid channel. A lot of what you discussed is inward looking, right? What is my appetite for doing this? Can I bring those many resources to it? And
Hmm.
but your initial bit was about specific markets anecdotally having that understanding. What might help is, who do you ask, or how do you at least build a heuristic or a sense of what you should know to determine that? I think that might help a little.
See, and I'll probably give from my experience. Of course, my experience also. Please please do understand that my experience has been in certain areas, right? I started my life in the cybersecurity risk space. I moved into customer experience. Uh, Dabbled at fintech. Probably, and then back at customer experience, right? So these are really the three universes that I have ever operated in, and there are multiple universes, and it could be very different when it comes to that. So with that disclaimer, um, I've found that Middle East, right? Middle Eastern markets have a deep offline channels are very successful if done right, right? I've seen mainland European markets do that, do have a very similar approach. It kind of, if you move mainland Europe westwards, it kind of reduces. People are more comfortable, especially from that perspective. Um, India, of course, it's a market which does well for both. Southeast Asia, again, offline channels are important, but not as much as everything else. Um, One rule of thumb, right, which I can give anybody, is when you look at a market, right, always see how the outsourcing industry does in that market, right? So if you look at the US, right, the US has been the first traditional country to take up uh, the global outsourcing model, right? Back from the days when Infosys existed and probably even before that, right? So their inclination to do business over a digital medium is probably higher. They would not meet you until and unless the discussion or the kind of value you bring on the table is that high. So if you want to sell them a simple nail cutter and you want to set up a consultative meeting on that, it's not something the market will respond to, right? But on the other hand, they would meet you only when the value is high, where the complexity is high and they need help in terms of understanding it. So my rule of thumb, I always look at it, and I think if you look at how much of the business is outsourced, how much of the ITES business has penetrated that market, you would find a very clear indicator of whether offline is the right way to operate, right? If you notice, and you would go back and have a look, most of the services firm, even though they operate in a global delivery model, have in region presence in the Middle East, right? They have in-region presence in Australia. So these are the kind of markets which, again, offline events, you can go, you will need offline events for you to kind of work for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think there might be something about labor costs in there, because when you mentioned US and outsourcing, there is a correlation, especially
Yeah,
Eastern to Western Europe and all of that. But
correct.
something to think about.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut in, Varun. Please continue.
Okay, so next question is about the UK market. So for UK market with GDPR in force, what are the other platforms to target apart from LinkedIn and email?
See, GDPR is really a force which works across the world, right? Um, Now, here is my view, right? And it might be a little divergent from marketing purists. Sure, you can look at other channels like Instagram and TikTok and so on and so forth. By the way, it doesn't work for many of the products and services that specifically in the SaaS space of the enterprise business that it kind of works. I think one needs to understand that rather than kind of diverting that channel, focus on organic to be able to give you uh, zero party data, right? People where there is a consent involved. Because believe me, the one, yes, sure, you would like to send an email to 10,000 people and tell them about the great feature you have launched or the new value that you offer, which is greater than everybody else. But it's a vanity metric because these 10,000 people do not want to hear from you. And if you look at being at CleverTap as well, being in the customer engagement space, the trend really is moving from a push to a pull. You need to be there when the customer asks for it. It's a prompt-based world, right? What started with people clicking to people swiping to people really prompting at this point in time. So for me, I think rather than trying to subvert it by saying, can I find channels where I can still reach out to 10,000 people to talk about? You should focus on consent and generating zero party data. For you to do that, organic can lead to that. Social media is a great place to do that. Vipul was right before we started the serious conversation here. We were talking about how he's kind of using Reddit, Quora, these kind of forums. Again, great forums for you to kind of focus, get people who are interested in similar topics to kind of extend that forward. G2 is another forum that you can use for your product, where you can have these conversations without really getting into that vanity metrics that, hey, this morning I reached out to 1 million people. Honestly, it doesn't matter if you reached out to the 100 who want to listen to you and got those 5 people to kind of have conversations which will run to revenue or convert to revenue for you. That's what one should be focused on. Rather than trying to find broadcast as a medium. The days of the broadcast are over. It's on demand right now. So my view would be that focus on those areas where you can generate that on demand or generate that demand coming from the other side rather than overtly fussing about whether you have been able to broadcast your message to the widest audience possible. Yeah.
Understood. I think this point. Final question. I think all other question you already answered during the presentation. So, how to balance localization and global brand consistency in international GTM strategies?
Okay. So if I understand that question, the question is how do you bring localization into global products?
How to balance localization and global brand consistency in international GTM strategies? Let me check through.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, there comes the wow. Because I'm also thinking about it. So the localization in terms of, see, localization primarily, how do you maintain brand consistency? Honestly, if you have those 3 pillars very clearly defined in your mind, right? Because those are the very basics that you start with. Those are foundational. After those foundational, that foundational place really gives you your positioning. And your positioning across markets vary, but do not vastly change, right? What changes is your messaging because that's where you bring in the uh, local nuances into your messaging, right? Um, a great product which prides itself in its ease of use continues to be that across markets, right? There is not a single market in the world which does not value ease of use. Yes, there are certain segments which value complexity of and diversity in their use cases over ease of use, but you will find a segment in every region where ease of use is an important one, which is where your product excels, right? So for me, the positioning remains the same. The messaging can vary from region to region based on, again, the way they perceive value. right? And to give you an example, and again, when we talk about localization, it's a very risky topic, I feel, because you can very well err on the side of being racist when you talk about specific characteristics of markets and people. Of course, there are no stereotypes, but um, recognition is a value which works in Eastern markets a lot more, right? So when you talk about your messaging, it's the recognition that people can gain. Recognition is a currency of value in the Eastern markets. In the Western markets, it is a lot more financially driven, right? Because it's also comes from the way in these parts of the world evaluate their relationship with the work that they do, their roles and responsibilities, right? Um, as you move towards the east, well, Japanese markets, work is almost people spend their entire life with a particular company. There's a certain attachment to what they do. There's a certain pride in what they do or the kind of brand that they are associated with. They consider it a part of their family. So when you kind of look at that market, your messaging should not, messaging, while your positioning can be cost effective, the messaging, if it comes across like, hey, save 30% of cost, might not resonate that well with people, right? Whereas if you go to a um, more capitalistic world, let me put it that way again, very dangerous terms to use. But if you move more towards the capitalistic part of the world, 30% cost is what they want to excel on metrics that they kind of bring to their work, and therefore they will value that more. So when you talk about cost effectiveness or message it across these two markets, localization will give you value, but at the end of the day, your positioning does not really change. Is my view, and that's where the consistency, the brand consistency that you're kind of trying to bring about stays the same. It's a very product marketer has answered this. To be very honest, if I travel a little bit further away from my desk into the brand marketer side of the world, they would say, "Hey, brand consistency is a lot more than just positioning. It's about the tone of voice, the color that you use, and so on and so forth." Sure, total respect for it. And that is a completely different conversation and probably not one where I am an expert at. But from a product marketing perspective, I always feel it's the messaging and never the positioning, which varies. And that in itself will give you that consistency you are trying to build, or that consistent narrative that you're trying to build across markets as a global brand. Yeah.
Understood, super. So one question from Ananya in the chat. For someone who has recently pivoted to PMM, would you recommend any industry certification as essential to grow in this role? If yes, which one would you recommend?
Um, See, I'm not a big fan of certifications, but there is one I think from the name slips me. The fact that the name slips me is not, it's not clearly says that it's not one of the industry's primary source of certification. But
Hmm.
really, the value is not on the certification space. The way I look at product marketers is the clarity with which they understand product marketing, right? And that really, a certification will help you kind of understand the frameworks, like some of the things that we talked about today.
Yeah.
But um, if you're looking for something which the market recognizes universally as, I don't know one myself. Um, it's not something that I really look out for, but um, it's really the understanding of those three, four pillars and the positioning that product marketing has across these four functions which matter. But I will look that up in terms of, there was one, I think PMA certification, right?
Yes.
I
Very
once upon
popular.
a time had a look at their curriculum. I found it interesting with a wide array of coverage in terms of what product marketing is, what it isn't, and so on and so forth. So great frameworks for you to work with. But if you are looking for a certification which is like a equivalent of a GARP certification or a ISO 27001, unfortunately none exists, because as I said, once was a black hole, continues to be a black hole, not just in India, across the world. It is a complex function to be able to bring down to a single curriculum, to be able to give authoritative certificates of expertise in, right? It's a continuous learning process. I do that all the day, all the time, in my role as well. Yeah.
Understood. Amaya is on the call. Amaya, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hello, sir. Thank you for this amazing session. Sir, if possible, I want to ask a question regarding can you please share from your experience at CleverTap and User and the companies that you worked for in the previous years on structuring a GTM strategy for the Indian market? And how did you crack the Indian segment?
Okay. Great question. First of all, Amaya, thanks for that question. And I know with all the great stuff Vipul at the pedestal Vipul put me at the beginning, I appear grizzly old. Um, Probably I am as well. So please don't call me sir. Sure, good enough. Now to answer your question, right? Again, I always start with disclaimers because in our line of work, it's very important you do that. Um, Cracking open the Indian market is a very, I don't think anybody has cracked it open as of yet. There are the behemoths like Geo to the Flipkarts and the Amazons of the world. I don't think anybody can claim to have cracked open the Indian market. It is a very complex space. It is really a very, very complex space. But um, from my experience, right, the go-to-market strategy in India, there is a common perception. If you go back to that framework of the market, right, those three levers that we were looking at, there is a perception in the market that Indian markets have a very high sensitivity to cost, right? Um, it's actually not true. In my experience at CleverTap as well as at Razorpay, very large businesses in the India market, some of the largest enterprises work with both these organizations. Um, it's There is a very large sensitivity to return on investment. So it's not the absolute value of the cost, which really drives Indian markets. So when you say that, hey, Indian markets, you drop in a discount and people will swarm to your door, that's not really true, especially in the enterprise space, right? And if you're operating there, even in the mid-market space, right? It's not true that if you give them a 20% or a 50% or a 70% discount, you'll have people swarming your doors. People are still very cognizant of what value they are deriving versus the cost they are paying for it. So even if your product or services is on offer at a 90% discount, but they feel that it doesn't give you the value that the cost is, they will not buy it, right? It's as simple as that. Okay. So this, I think this, and I'll keep it to that because it's a common misconception when it comes to the Indian market that look, the cheaper product will do better. Not really. The one which gives you more value for the cheapest price will do better. Makes it a little more complex, little more difficult, but that's why I said it's a market which I don't think anybody has cracked open yet. And thankfully a very large market. So even if you don't completely crack it open and take a chunk of it, it's still a large sum for you to take home. But I think that's something for me, my experience with CleverTap and Razorpay and their success in this market has clearly made me realize that no, most of my experience before that was with the international markets only. Um, but Indian markets, I think that's something that you definitely, when you're structuring your go-to-market strategy, you should keep in mind that the return on investment is what the optimizing parameter are, whether that's in your positioning, whether that be in your messaging, whether that be in any marketing channel that you are kind of using to drive your go-to-market motions, right? Um, And that for me was a revelation, I feel, in terms of how we understand that market. And again, Vipul's on the call. He's been in that market for a bit. So he might have different opinions about it. But yeah, for me, I think that's something which has always helped me in understanding and really working with that market a lot better. So when you are trying to find your messaging, it's not just saying, "Hey, I cost 100, I'm giving it to you for 10." Honestly, you would feel that everyone will jump at it. They won't. They won't. They would still try to understand how much will they get out of it. Would that exceed the price that they are paying? And should they get a product for 20, which gives them a return of 80, they will take that and not you at 10. If you bring even a 30 on top of the 10 that they spend for you, right? So keep that in mind. I think for me, it was a revelation. It was a learning, which kind of worked well for me.
Thank you, sir.
Payal is on the call. Payal, you can ask your question.
Hello, Subharun. Thanks for the great session. Uh,
Hey, thank
I would
you.
like to ask you that what would you advise someone who is just starting out in product marketing, like in terms of relevant skills?
Okay. Tough question. Maybe a time to say wow again, but uh, see, my view to product marketing is, or somebody who started, or I'll give you where when I transitioned from being a strategy consultant into product marketing, right? Uh, the first thing of product marketing, the first word that you hear is product, right? I feel that anybody who transitions into product marketing, the first thing that they should spend adequate amount of time going into the depth of it is really to understand the product that they are offering, understand its capabilities, understand the value that it derives, understand the use cases that it drives for the customers, why people like to use it and why people don't, right? And the don't part is equally important, to understand why people don't like to use it, right? Because that's really the foundational element. And I'll revisit one of the questions was asked earlier part of this AMA, right? Why do product marketing get confused with marketing? Um, that's because people don't understand that product marketers are product experts themselves. uh, your job is as much to take the product to the market, which also marketing does, to take the product to the market, as it is to bring the market back to the product. So the P2M motion as well as the M2P motion, right? To bring the market back into the product is a very critical part of product marketers. In all the companies that I have worked for, or the brands that I have worked for, uh, where I've seen product marketing really bring value and find a seat at the top of the house, has been a place where the product marketing has also been able to bring the market back to the product. Incorporate the feedback that you see out there back into your product, because product marketing is the only one who can bring the product from that into that feasibility planes that we saw in those 3 rooms that we discussed today, right? Um, Marketing will take where you stand and positioning it or messaging it out into the market the best way possible with help from product marketing. But product marketing can actually change that positioning as well. So if my career, at the beginning of my career, when I moved into product marketing, you wouldn't believe what I did for the first 3 to 6 months of my job. Uh, I wrote RFPs, uh, tons of them, 300 pagers, 600 pagers. What that did for me was that it gave me a very thorough understanding of what the product does, what are its core capabilities, what's its value proposition, what are the use cases, what do the customers like and don't like. And that in itself, right, is the greatest arsenal that a product marketer has when he walks into any conversation. Of course, a product manager knows the product capabilities more than you, right? A customer success person knows how much what the product customers like and don't like, right? And each of them, right? Sales knows certain parts of the picture, but when you know all of these together about the product, that's a that's the differentiator that you have in the table. Yeah. And my suggestion to anybody starting with product marketing is really to understand that very deeply, right? Because the rest of it really is, as we talked about, right? The three pillars of product, market, customer, and the various. When you take that from an understanding perspective into the implementation sphere, product has its own areas, right? It has the product strategy piece, it has the product launch piece. Markets has both demand piece as well as the sales enablement piece. Customer has both advocacy and customer marketing as well as the adoption piece, right? So these are the tasks that you do. But really, at the crux of it all is the understanding of the product. If you understand that product well, if you are the core expert who understands all these four aspects of the product, that's where I always start as a product marketer. And from henceforth, wherever I've moved companies or I've gone to newer products, um, I ensure that in the first 3 to 6 months, I understand the product very, very deeply. Um, em- and fortunately for you, if you're transitioning from any of the core product areas, you would understand the product, but from one perspective, build the other perspectives, because while you might understand the product very well, the use cases is something which is more a customer success perspective. So spend significant amount of time doing that. If you have that in place, the rest of it is really various motions, right? Product launch, sure, you have eons of things to learn about in terms of how to position, message, channel, launch, etc. Difference between a launch and a release and so on and so forth. But um, if your foundations are very strong, um, all of that will almost naturally come to you when you start to think about what a product launch should look like, or what an adoption journey should be as a product marketer when you're designing one, right? So my advice always, if you are pivoting to product marketing, the function itself starts with the word product. Um, Go very deep into it, because that's what will define success for you as you kind of learn some of the other more, I would call them more mundane skills, to kind of bring on the table. Yeah.
That's a great advice, Subharun. Gopal, can you
Yeah,
please ask?
sure. Hi, Shubharun. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been really insightful so far. I'm Gopal. I have previously worked with both Varun and Vipul closely, and they're also great friends of mine. So, based on your experience of leading the PMM function, I would like to know what is the objective way to measure sales enablement efforts, especially if the sales motions are in SMB and mid market. Because in enterprise, perhaps the PMM has more hands-on deal support for the enterprise sales teams. But in my current stint, I work on sales enablement for SMB and mid market, but I still don't have clarity on what is the right way to measure success for the sales enablement efforts.
So yeah, good question. And I think one of my ex brands and a much loved brand, Freshworks, was a deeply SMB focused sales motion. We of course used to have a two-engine model with both the SMB and the mid-market enterprise space. Uh, See, from an SMB perspective, first of all, in terms of sales enablement, right? Um, I and I would like to have that conversation with you in terms of, when you say SMB, why you mean, I'm guessing you mean SDRs and inside sales, right? Because a full-on sales motion might not be the most CAC intelligent way of doing it, right? Might be a little outside the feasibility plane, but the way I would evaluate it, right, in terms of, and this was something which we used to do at Freshworks. We used to look at, when we say sales enablement in an SMB motion, I almost look at it not just as a sales enablement, but a field enablement motion, right? So our approach used to be able to create enablement where the which even the customer themselves can sell to themselves, right? And that is where you can track metrics like how much of field sales time or sorry, inside sales time um, gets involved in these sales motions, right? Uh, your job would be to reduce, your really objective is to reduce that time to zero. Of course, it never becomes a zero, but we used to actually have a metric at desk which we used to track in terms of how many of our free trial sign-ups convert into paid customers or move into our paid plans without anybody actually talking to them, because every conversation costs us money. And when you are operating in the SMB space, uh, every conversation you have adds to your cost of acquisition. So one way to look at it would be to measure the time that it takes for you to close those deals, right? Also for you to look at what's the number of touch points that you have to do, right? Again, without naming that company, I'll tell you that in one of my past experiences, uh, in one of the organizations which were primarily enterprise focused and was moving into the SMB space, um, the common problem there was that we realized that the amount of touch points that we have in the enterprise and the mid market is the same. It's taking us the same cycle times. It is taking us the same number of interactions, and we are just getting smaller deals, uh, which is really moving away from that feasibility plane, right? So I would say that these are the two core metrics that I would want to keep an eye on when I'm looking at um, field enablement efforts as far as SMB is concerned. One is the cycle time. One really is the number of touch points. The lower it is, the better your enablement is. If your reps are closing deals on a single phone call, great. If they're doing it in the first 5 minutes of the phone call, you're doing better than if they're taking half an hour to close that deal. So if you want to quantify, outside of course, running surveys and things like that, which I am a little suspicious of all the time. But if you want to evaluate how effective your sales enablement is, these are the two matrices that I have in the past seen being used and successfully being used in the SMB motion. Hope that answers your question, Gopal.
Certainly, Subharun. I mean, I hadn't gotten these answers elsewhere. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And just fun fact, Shubharun, he is
Yeah.
working at your favorite brand, Freshworks
Yeah.
only. So,
And I've recently moved into Freshdesk, Subharun.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Uh, Welcome to my old home. Let me know how it's going. I have some friends there still. And are you with the product marketing team?
Yes, I'm in the product marketing team.
So do say hi to Nats when you
Sure. Yeah.
Ajay, you can ask your question.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the session, Shubharun. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, I can hear
Hello.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I wanted to ask, since I'm actually transitioning from an entrepreneurship position right now, and I've been doing a lot of product related work since past 5 months. But unfortunately, I was due to so many engagements out there, I was not able to form a network that I could actually rely upon to find a proper product related opportunity or PMM opportunity. So, how should I approach it, as well as is there a specific pedigree required? Because again, I see like any PMM out there has some bit of awesome degree, right?
Yeah. Um, Honestly, not in my book. I've seen great product marketeers come from all kinds of pedigree. A case in point is Vipul. He's, I don't know, most of you probably know, he's a lawyer, and a great product marketer, a great one, right? So I do not believe that product marketing as a function requires, and goes back to that question, what certifications do I need, or do I need certifications? No, you don't need certifications, because what you do in product marketing is extremely logical, right? The closer you stay to logic, the better you will be at your job, right? So definitely no pedigree required. I don't think from my um, friend circle of or colleagues that I have worked with who are now heading product marketing in many of the businesses in India. Um, I don't see a I don't see why, as a if you're coming from entrepreneurship as an area and being an entrepreneur yourself, you probably already have done product marketing, right?
Mhm.
It's just that you probably did not formally talk about product marketing. I think what Ajay would probably help you is to understand what product marketing is, because when you and as I say that if you've been an entrepreneur, you have already been a product marketer, so you don't lack that experience. It's just that the way you position it, as you understand the function a little bit deeper, you should be able to position what you have done in terms of your work into something which generic product marketeers would be able to understand. And that's about my advice in terms of how do you kind of get into it. And I've already answered your question. All kinds of pedigrees I've seen, being
Okay.
great product marketeers. All kind of great pedigrees coming from a lot of places. Not being great product marketers is also another case. Unfortunately, I have not met a lot of them. I have always had great people to work with, learn from upwards and downwards. But to answer your question, I at least do not look at a specific pedigree, saying that, hey, you need an MBA degree, or you need something like that, or you need to be an engineer, or you need to have a product background or a customer success background to become.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh, do we have a time? Do we have time to ask a follow-up questions, or uh, is it limited
Yeah,
to
please
one
go
or
ahead,
two?
Ajay. No, please go ahead.
What does a proof of work looks like for a PMM if you're just starting out, but with a background of earlier product development or marketing?
See, again, as I said that product marketing for me, again, if I'm defining product marketing as a function, right? I always like to use that three pillar, two boxes each kind of a model. So for me, there is a product pillar, which really is we talked about the product to market motion, right? Really managing your product launches, managing your go to market for the product features, and so on and so forth. The M2P part of it, which is really having a seat on the table on the product roadmap, being able to do market research, be able to do competitive intelligence, to bring all of that back to the product, to be able to drive the roadmap in a much more practical way. If I look at the marketing pillar, two parts of it. One on the demand generation side of things, where that's where product marketing is where the positioning, the messaging, the go to market strategy kind of comes from, right? Which is basically the build part of the GTM. And then we have our friends in marketing who take up the take up the distribute side of things, right? So all your experiences around positioning, messaging can be a great showcase. In terms of sales enablement, that's the second part of the market pillar. Your ability to kind of pitch a product, your ability to kind of handle exceptions, to see what those exceptions are, and rightly provide the answers to people as to what happens when they raise those exceptions during the sales cycle. Again, a great positioning for you to be at. If you have had experiences on the customer pillar side in running customer advocacy, right? cross-sell, upsell programs, or cross-sell, upsell opportunity identification, opportunity pitches. And finally, if you're coming from a dev background, you would have definitely, or a product management background, you would have definitely had experience around how to measure and accelerate adoption, right? Which as a SaaS product marketer is very critical, right? So for me, these are the 6 boxes, and I'm pretty much sure great part about product marketing and pitching it is that if you look at these 6 boxes, right, there are others in the organization which also do these boxes, but no one who does all of these 6 together. But if you come from a customer success background, advocacy, cross-sell, upsell, um, adoption, you would have enough experiences there to kind of position yourself well. If you come from a product dev and a management background, of course, P2M, MP in terms of roadmaps, strategies, you would have lots of things to position. If you come from marketing, the demand gen side of things, if you come from sales, the sales enablement pieces, I've always, at least in my functions, looked at bringing people from these functions into our fold, because while they learn the other boxes of product marketing, they go deeper into this particular, they already know one of these boxes pretty well, and from the other side of the table. So I think if you look at your background, Ajay, and your work so far, you would generally find a couple of these boxes where you have done some work, and it would always be wise for you to position that to a product marketing head, because um, people like me, I like to hire from the other side of the table, because the other side of the table brings a certain depth in that area, which then contributes and to the overarching knowledge of the product marketing function itself. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Shubharan, for like a super detailed and awesome answer. In fact, I've made the notes. I'll work on them. And
Absolutely.
probably if I get the time, I'll drop it to both of the awesome peoples who made this happen, Varun and Vipul. Thank you very much, guys, all of you.
Yeah.
All the best, Ajay.
Thank you, Vijay. And Ajay, I have a very similar story like you as well. I was also a startup founder previously, and then I shifted into product marketing. So I think whatever Shubharun said, it was so on point. I think the manager who also had me at Cash Free, he also has the same belief that I want to bring people who has. I haven't done MBA, so like I don't want uh, that pedigree of the degree, but what I really want is someone bringing the other side of the table. So thank you so much, Shubharun. I am also very happy to hear that answer. Guys, we have already taken so much of time of Shubharun. So one last question, I think, then we can close it. Anybody want to go? Cool. Then I think we have enough questions. Thank you so much, Shubharum, again for giving so much of detailed information. I think we can't say enough thanks to you. We have been
Yeah, and
trying to do this
thank you for having me here. I think it was a very interesting session. Lots of very interesting questions.
indeed.
Some difficult ones as well.
Yeah.
And I've noted their names who have asked me the difficult questions. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding about that. It was a very, very fun session, very interactive. And thanks to you and Vipul for taking this initiative, taking it's always difficult for a nascent function like product marketing in India to do
True.
what you guys are doing. So all kudos and all the very best. And all of us who've been here for a while, you have our love and support as you make this bigger and take it at a grander scale. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so very much. I think it's all about support from people like you, support from all the people who are in the community. So thank you so very much.
Great.
One last request, all of you, if you guys can turn on your camera, I think it's it would be great if we just take one last photo that we can share across. So if you guys can please, otherwise it will be just S, M, P.
Wait, I need to provide permissions to the campus.
Request few others if you guys can do. Request to you also, Vipul.
Vipul might be on other duties right now.
I was, but it's happening in the back end, hopefully. But I have to say, Shubharun, Veera really likes your voice. She's being very quiet. I'm wondering if I can use the recording of the session.
I have probably bored her to sleep.
Oh no. She was very interested on some of the answers, at least.
Well, you have a future product marketer at hand.
Not sure if I should wish
Yeah.
that for her or not, but yeah.
Just a second. I think few more people are turning on the camera, so we'll wait just for 2 more seconds. Cool. Good smile, everyone. This is going on social media. Excellent. Let me see. Just a second.
You said, let me see. I just turned off his light. It's back on.
I think it's good enough. Thank you. Thank you so very much, all of you again. And I think final announcement, Vipul, we only have 1 minute if you just.
All right, folks. Again, thank you so much to Shubharun. I think I have abused whatever, positive feeling he has towards me and the long conversations we had while we were working together at Recipe. Honestly, that was just amazing, Shubharan. I'm really grateful for your time and effort to put that together.
I really enjoyed it myself.
I'm glad. And we'll hopefully do it again, even though I'm pretty sure I've run out of whatever credit I have.
No, I would love to. It was a very interesting and interactive conversation on something which I really love, and you know that. So yeah, time just flew. Just looking, we are way ahead. We are way over time, but
Oh,
I really had a good time.
I'm glad to hear it. Thank you so much, Shubharun. And
Thanks.
folks, with respect to GoPMM, uh, we are coming close to the 7 month mark on December 15th. And what we wanted to do, among other things, was have a town hall for the community where we take note and do a retrospective on what we've done, understand what the way forward is, and how we'd want to evolve to be able to do more for you. When Varun and I decided to start this out, we had no idea what we were doing. And similar to that very interesting AI generated image Shubharan put there, we were children experimenting in a lab with colorful chemicals. But the output of it has been a vibrant community with some lovely people with sessions like this that honestly make me so pleased that we've been able to do something that's generating value for so many people. And Shubharan, you might not have seen this, but on that WhatsApp chat, 90% of the time people will ask some questions that the natural reaction would be occasionally wow to. And the effort that everyone puts in to respond, to help, to offer resources has been incredible. And that is part of why I think it's important for Varun and us to stop looking at this as a community we are running and something that we are all doing together. And part of that is why we want to have a town hall where everyone comes together. We look back at what we've done and take collective decisions about what the route forward is. What we're planning to do on December 15th is begin by talking about what the journey has been, what our plans are, get your opinions on what we could be doing better and doing differently, and moving forward, figuring out what that path for GoPMM is. One aspect of that is also learning what the community is like. And one piece of that puzzle is that we're going to be doing what we're calling a GoPMM census. We're going to be sending out some way of collecting information about everyone who's in the community. I know people have registered for our webinars, they've given us their LinkedIn profiles. We'll try to make it as simple as possible. If we can just collect that info from just a LinkedIn URL, we'll do that. But the idea is that once we create that network, when people are asking questions like, is there anyone here from Misho? Are there people from particular companies or particular industries that might be able to help? We could have a repository where we could set up connections with people who might be able to help you, as opposed to asking out in WhatsApp and someone might not be available or might not be looking. So we want to definitely do that as an endpoint, but it's important for us also to take stock of who is in our community and what we can do there. So we're going to be sending that out in the run up to this December 15th town hall. Additionally, we're going to use that as a leverage point to come up with a broad survey to do a state of Indian PMM report that we'll try to have come out in the early part of the next calendar year. But at least for now, the main point is that December 15th, we will share the invite for it and a time slot. We would love for all of you to be there. We'll obviously put it on the WhatsApp group as well for the actual larger group, and we'll take it from there. But thank you so much. Have loved to be a part of this journey, and every step of it just makes me happier. Thank you again, Subharun. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to run and take care of things, but I love you all. Take care.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Thanks, everybody, and good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Good night.